There is a verdict that some people carry quietly, never saying it out loud, but feeling it in the deepest part of themselves, especially late at night when the house is quiet and the day's noise has finally died down. It is not a single thought about a single thing. It is a sentence passed on the whole self, a quiet, heavy conclusion that has settled over the years, one disappointment at a time, until it feels less like an opinion and more like a fact. The verdict is this: I am a failure. Not, I failed at that one thing, which everyone does, but something larger and more crushing, that you yourself, at the core, are a failure, a disappointment, not good enough, never quite measuring up, falling short again and again at the things that matter most, and unlikely to ever be any different. If that is the verdict you have been carrying, if you feel like a failure, if you are disappointed in yourself, if you keep falling short and falling back into the same patterns, and you have started to believe that this is simply who you are, then I want to sit with you for this hour, gently. Not to hand you a motivational speech about how you are actually wonderful, because you have heard those, and they bounce off the heavy verdict without touching it. But to tell you something truer and deeper, that the verdict you have passed on yourself is not the verdict God has passed on you. That the people God has used most powerfully throughout history were, by every honest measure, failures. And that falling, even falling again and again, is not the same as being a failure, not in the eyes of the one who matters most. So stay with me, and let me speak gently to the one who feels they have failed. And let me say at the very start what I will not do, so you can trust me through this hour. I am not going to dismiss your failures, to pretend you have not really fallen short, to wave away the real disappointments with empty reassurance, because you would see through that immediately, and rightly. Some of your failures are real. You have fallen short. So has everyone who has ever lived. I am not here to deny that. But I am also not going to let you believe the lie that your failures are the truest thing about you, or that they have placed you beyond the love and the use of God. Those two things, your real shortcomings and your unshakable worth before God, are both true at once, and the gospel holds them together. You can be someone who genuinely fails, and someone God genuinely loves and delights to use at the very same time, because His love for you was never based on your success in the first place. So I will not flatter you, and I will not condemn you. I will simply tell you the truth. You have failed, as we all have, and you are loved, held, and far from finished, as we all may be. Let me begin by simply naming what this feels like. Because the loneliness of feeling like a failure is that you rarely say it to anyone. It is the way a specific failure becomes a global identity. There is a vast difference between saying I failed and saying I am a failure. But the heart slides from one to the other so easily that you may not even notice it happen. You did not reach a goal, and somewhere inside, the conclusion formed, I am the kind of person who does not reach goals. You let someone down, and it became, I am someone who lets people down. One failure at a time, the specific became the general. The thing you did became the thing you are, until the word failure stopped describing an event and started describing you. And that is a heavy thing to carry, because you cannot escape an event that has become an identity. You can walk away from a single failure. You cannot walk away from yourself. And once that identity settles in, it begins to rewrite even your memories. You look back over your whole life through the lens of failure, and suddenly the good is invisible and only the shortfalls remain. The times you showed up, the people you helped, the quiet faithfulness of ordinary days, all of it fades. And what stands out, lit up and magnified, are the failures, the embarrassments, the things you wish you had done differently. The verdict does not just judge your present, it reaches backward and recolors your entire past until you can hardly remember a version of your story that is not a story of falling short. This is one of the cruelest things the verdict does. It is not content to make you feel like a failure today. It convinces you that you have always been one, that your whole life has been a record of not being enough. And that is simply not a true accounting. It is failure wearing the mask of honesty, leaving out every good thing and calling the distortion the truth. It is the quiet tally that runs at night. When the distractions fall away and you are alone with your thoughts, the accounting begins, and it is never kind. It lists the things you have not accomplished, the people you have disappointed, the dreams you set out toward and never reached, the version of your life you thought you would be living by now and are not. It compares where you are to where you meant to be, and the gap becomes the whole story. The tally does not mention the things you have done well, the people you have loved, the quiet faithfulness no one saw. It only counts the shortfalls, and it counts them every night. And the sum it arrives at is always the same: not enough. And the cruelest thing about that nightly accounting is that it pretends to be honest, pretends to be simply facing facts, when in truth, it is one of the most dishonest voices you will ever listen to. An honest accounting would include the whole ledger, both columns, the failures and the faithfulness, the falls and the times you stood, the people you let down and the people you carried. But the midnight tally only ever reads from one column. It is not telling you the truth about your life. It is telling you a carefully edited lie, a selection of only the worst, presented as the whole. If a friend described your life the way your own midnight thoughts describe it, mentioning only your failures and none of your faithfulness, you would rightly call them cruel and unfair. Yet you let that unfair voice be the judge of your worth, night after night, simply because it speaks from inside your own head. Learn to question it. When the tally begins, you can answer, "This is not the whole story. This is only the column you have chosen to read, and I will not accept a verdict reached by leaving out half the evidence. The accounting that condemns you is rigged. Do not trust its sum. It is the same failure repeating, the pattern you cannot seem to break. Perhaps the hardest part is not a single failure, but the repetition. The same sin you keep falling back into, the same weakness that keeps tripping you, the same resolution made and broken and made again, until you begin to despair of ever changing. You promised yourself this time would be different, and it was not. You thought you had moved past it, and you had not. And the repetition feels like proof, like evidence beyond argument that you are simply this way, that change is not possible for you, that you will be fighting and losing this same battle forever. The repeated failure does not just disappoint you, it convinces you, slowly, that you are beyond improvement. And there is a particular despair that comes from fighting the same battle over and over, because each repetition feels like it erases all the progress before it. You went a long time without falling, and then you fell, and it felt as though the whole stretch of faithfulness counted for nothing, as though you were right back at the beginning, as though all the ground you had gained had vanished in a single stumble. But that is not how growth actually works. A single fall does not erase a long climb. It is a stumble on a path that is still, overall, leading upward. The person who falls after a long stretch of standing is not back where they started. They are a person who has grown stronger, who stumbled, and who can rise again from higher ground than before. Do not let one repetition convince you that nothing has changed. The very fact that the falls trouble you more than they used to, that you grieve them more deeply, that you get up faster than you once did, is evidence of growth that despair refuses to count. You are not running in place. You are climbing a long hill. And even the stumbles are happening higher up than they used to. And for many people, the sharpest failure of all is the spiritual one. The sense that they are failing even at faith, that they are a disappointment as a believer, that they keep falling into the same sin, struggling with the same doubts, making no visible progress in the very area where they most long to grow. This may be the loneliest failure of all, because it feels like failing God Himself. And who can you tell that to? You read of others who seem to walk closely with God, whose faith seems strong and steady, and you look at your own faltering, doubting, stumbling walk and conclude you must be a spiritual failure, barely hanging on, surely a disappointment to heaven. If that is your particular ache tonight, hear this with special tenderness. The very fact that you grieve your spiritual failures, that you long to walk more closely with God, that it pains you to keep stumbling, is itself the surest sign that the Spirit of God is alive and at work in you. A person truly indifferent to God does not lie awake grieved over their spiritual shortfalls. Your sorrow over failing Him is not evidence that you are failing. It is evidence that you love Him, and that He is at work in you, and that you are exactly the kind of struggling, longing, imperfect believer that the whole story of grace was written for. It is the endless comparison to everyone else. You look around, and everyone seems to have it together, to be succeeding where you are failing, to have figured out the things you keep getting wrong. They seem more disciplined, more accomplished, more whole, more competent at the basic business of living. And measured against them, you come up short again and again, never quite keeping pace, always a step behind, always the one who has not managed what others seem to manage so easily. You do not see their private failures, their own midnight tallies. You see only their polished surface, and you measure your messy insides against it, and you lose every time. This is one of the great unfairnesses you do to yourself, and you may not even realize you are doing it. You compare the fullness of your own inner experience, every doubt, every failure, every shameful thought, every shortfall no one else can see, against the curated, external, public version of everyone else, the version they have arranged for the world to see. You know all your own failures from the inside. You know almost none of theirs. So of course you come out worse in the comparison. It was never a fair contest. You are weighing your private worst against their public best. The confident person you envy has their own midnight tally. The one who seems to have it all together is behind closed doors, fighting battles you would recognize all too well. Comparison is a thief precisely because it is built on incomplete information, on a lie of appearances. Set it down. You were never meant to measure your worth against the polished surface of another person's life. And you certainly were never meant to measure it against a surface that hides as much struggle as your own. And besides, God never asked you to be someone else. He made you, particular and unrepeatable, with your own road to walk, your own pace, your own struggles, your own purpose. And He measures you not against the person beside you, but against nothing at all, because His love for you was never a competition you could lose. The person you keep comparing yourself to is not your standard. Their successes are not your failures, and their gifts are not your debts. You are responsible only to be faithful with your own life, your own portion, your own small set of things, and to leave the comparing behind. There will always be someone who seems to be doing better. There will always be someone, though you may not see them, who is struggling more. The whole exhausting game is one you were never required to play. Step off the scale. Stop weighing yourself against everyone else. You have only ever been asked to walk your own road, faithfully, one rising at a time, in the love of a God who is not comparing you to anyone. It is the painful gap between who you meant to be and who you are. Somewhere inside you is a picture of the person you intended to become, the character you hoped to have, the life you meant to build, the way you wanted to love the people around you. And every day you fall short of that picture, and the distance between the intended self and the actual self becomes its own grief. You are not who you meant to be. You did not become what you set out to become. And living in that gap, with the person you hoped to be always visible, just out of reach, is a quiet and constant ache. And the ache is sharpest in the people who care most, because only those who aim high ever feel they have fallen short of the aim. A person with no vision of who they want to be feels no gap at all. It is precisely because you hold a picture of a better, kinder, more faithful version of yourself that you grieve the distance from it. In other words, the very pain you feel is a strange kind of evidence of something good in you, a longing for goodness, a refusal to settle, a conscience still tender enough to be grieved. The people who feel like failures are very often the ones who care the most deeply about being good, which is why they feel every shortfall so sharply. So do not take the ache itself as proof that you are a failure. Take it as proof that you still love what is good, still want to grow, still have not given up on becoming who you were made to be. That ache is not your enemy. Handled rightly, brought to God rather than turned into self-hatred, it is the very thing that keeps drawing you upward toward the person you long to be. And that is the exhaustion of trying and failing until you are tempted to simply stop. There is only so many times a person can try and fall short before something in them wants to give up, to stop setting goals they will only fail to reach, to stop hoping for change that never comes, to protect themselves from the next disappointment by no longer trying at all. The weariness of repeated failure can drain the will to keep going, until quitting starts to look like mercy, like the sensible response to a long record of falling short. If you are near that exhaustion tonight, if part of you just wants to stop trying, let me speak very gently to that weariness. Because the truth I have to tell you is the opposite of giving up, and far kinder than the verdict that has worn you down. I want you to know that the weariness itself is not a sin or a failure. It is the natural result of carrying a load you were never meant to carry. The load of trying to be good enough on your own strength. Of course you are tired. You have been straining under an impossible weight. The weight of self-justification, the endless effort to earn a worth that was never for sale, to prove yourself by a performance that was never required. Anyone would be exhausted under that. The answer to the exhaustion is not to try harder and crush yourself further, and it is not to give up and abandon the path entirely. The answer is to set down the impossible load you were never meant to carry and to let yourself be carried instead. There is an invitation, old and tender, for exactly the weary, to come to the one who is gentle and lowly, and to find rest, to take up a lighter burden than the one that has worn you out. Your exhaustion is not a signal to quit. It is a signal that you have been carrying the wrong weight, and that it is time to lay it down and rest in the one who carries you. Here is the truth, and I want you to hold it carefully. In the kingdom of God, the people he has used most were, almost without exception, failures. This is not a sentimental exaggeration. The book God gave us is full, from beginning to end, not of impressive, competent, successful people, but of people who failed, often spectacularly, often repeatedly, and whom God loved and used and redeemed anyway. If failure disqualified a person from God's purposes, the scriptures would be nearly empty. Instead, they are crowded with deserters and doubters, cowards and quitters, people who fell and fell and fell, and were lifted up again every time. God does not work mainly through those who never fail. He works again and again through those who fail and are restored. And that means your failure, far from putting you outside his reach, places you in the exact company of the people he has most delighted to use. Run your eye over the great figures of the faith, and notice how few of them have clean records. There is the man who would become the rock of the church, who denied he even knew his Lord 3 times, with curses on the worst night. There is the towering missionary who, before his transformation, had been a violent persecutor, dragging believers to prison. There is the shepherd king, a man after God's own heart, who fell into terrible sin and tried to cover it. There is the prophet who, after a great victory, collapsed under a tree and begged to die. Failure, weakness, collapse, sin, cowardice. These are not the exceptions among the people God used. They are nearly the rule. It is almost as if God went out of his way to fill his book with failures, so that no future failure could ever look at that record and conclude there was no hope for them. The whole long parade of restored failures is, in a sense, a message addressed directly to you, that the God who used all of these can use you. That your failures put you not outside the story, but squarely inside it, in the company of the very people heaven has most delighted to redeem. Let me tell you about one of them, a young man named John Mark, whose great failure is recorded plainly in the scriptures for everyone to see. He started out promising, traveling with the Apostle Paul and Barnabas on their first great missionary journey. But somewhere in the middle of it, when it got hard, when the work got difficult and frightening, John Mark quit. He abandoned the mission, left Paul and Barnabas, and went home. It was a real failure, a genuine desertion at a critical moment, and it was not quickly forgotten. Later, when Barnabas wanted to give the young man a second chance and bring him along again, Paul refused, so firmly that he and Barnabas, who had been partners, split over it. Paul did not think a man who had quit when things got hard could be trusted with the work. By every measure, John Mark was a failure, written off by the greatest missionary of the age, a cautionary tale, a young man who had blown his one chance. But that is not where his story ends, and that is the whole point. Years passed, and at the very end of Paul's life, writing one of his final letters from prison, knowing his death was near, Paul named the people he wanted near him in his last days, and among them, astonishingly, was John Mark. Paul wrote, Take Mark, and bring him with thee, for he is profitable to me for the ministry." The quitter had become profitable. The deserter had become someone the great apostle now wanted beside him at the end. The failure had been restored, so completely that the very man who once refused to travel with him now asked for him by name. And there is more. This same John Mark, the one who quit, the one who failed, is the one tradition tells us wrote the Gospel of Mark, one of the 4 accounts of the life of Jesus that the Church has treasured ever since. The young man, whose failure was recorded for all to see, became the author of a gospel read by billions. That is what God does with failures. He does not discard them, He restores them, and He often makes them, in the end, profitable beyond anything their failure would have predicted. And do not miss how public his failure was, because this matters if your own failures feel exposed and humiliating. John Mark's desertion was not hidden away discreetly. It was written into the permanent record of the Scriptures, argued over by apostles, the cause of a famous split between 2 great men, known to the whole early church. If anyone had reason to feel that his failure had defined him in everyone's eyes, branded him permanently as the one who quit, it was John Mark. And yet, God was not finished with him, and the public nature of his failure did not prevent his public restoration. The same Scriptures that record his quitting also record his profitableness. The same story that holds his failure holds his redemption. So if part of your pain is that your failures were seen, that people know, that you feel branded by them in the eyes of others, take heart from this young man. A failure witnessed by everyone became a restoration witnessed by everyone. God is not limited by who saw you fall. He is well able to let them see you rise. Before I go further, let me pause for something gently. Sometimes the feeling of being a failure does not stay a feeling. It sinks into a darkness that whispers, "You are worthless," that everyone would be better off without you, that there is no point in going on. If that whisper has come close to you tonight, please hear me. It is lying, and you do not have to face it alone. Reach out to someone you trust, a friend, a pastor, a counselor, or a helpline in your country, and tell them what you are carrying. You are not a burden, and your worth was never measured by your successes or destroyed by your failures. Please let someone walk with you through this. And if it would help, you can write one word in the comments, just the word "restored," so you can see how many others are carrying this same heavy verdict tonight, and know you are not alone in it. Now let me tell you about a man who failed at the one thing he was supposed to be best at. Among the closest followers of Jesus was a man named Thomas, and he is remembered, fairly or not, for a failure of faith. When the others told him they had seen the risen Lord, Thomas could not believe it. He had failed at the very thing a follower of Jesus is supposed to do. He could not take it on faith, could not trust the testimony. And he said plainly that unless he could see the wounds with his own eyes and touch them with his own hands, he would not believe. He fell short exactly where it mattered most. He doubted. He failed to believe. And if anyone deserved to be written off for a spiritual failure, it might seem to be the man who could not even believe his Lord had risen. But watch how Jesus treated this failure, because it tells you everything about how God treats yours. Jesus did not write Thomas off. He did not shame him in front of the others, did not lecture him, did not cast him out for his lack of faith. Instead, the risen Christ came back, specifically, a second time. And the Scripture suggests he came in no small part for Thomas, for the one who had failed to believe. And he said to him, gently, reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. He met the failure exactly where the failure was. He offered Thomas the very thing Thomas had said he needed. He did not require Thomas to fix his doubt before coming near. He came near, into the doubt, and tenderly invited the failing man to believe. And Thomas, the doubter, the one who fell short, became, tradition tells us, one who carried the message of Jesus to the ends of the earth and gave his life for the one he had once been unable to believe. The failure of faith was not the end of Thomas. The gentle Christ who came back for him saw to that. And think about the lengths to which Jesus went for this one failing man. The other disciples had already seen him. The mission was already underway. By any efficient reckoning, Jesus could have left Thomas behind, the one straggler who could not keep up in faith. Instead, the risen Lord arranged another appearance, came back into that locked room, and addressed himself directly to the doubter, offering his own wounded hands to the one who had said he needed to see them. That is not the behavior of a God who is impatient with failure. That is the behavior of a shepherd who goes after the one, who will cross back through locked doors for the single struggling soul, who does not move on and leave the failing behind, but comes back, specifically, tenderly, for them. If you have been afraid that your failures have caused God to move on without you, to focus his attention on people who are doing better, let the image of Christ returning for Thomas correct you. He comes back for the ones who fail. He crosses every barrier for the doubter, the straggler, the one who could not keep up. He came back for Thomas, and he will come just as surely for you. And notice the gentleness of how he did it. He could have exposed Thomas, named his doubt in front of everyone, made an example of his failure. Instead, he came offering only his wounds and a tender invitation to believe, treating the failing man not as a problem to be corrected, but as a beloved to be reassured. There was no shaming in it, no "I told you so," no public humiliation, only a Savior meeting a struggler with exactly the kindness the struggler needed. This is how God deals with your failures too. Not by parading them, not by rubbing your face in them, but by coming close with a gentleness that disarms the shame and invites you, tenderly, to trust again. If the voice in your head that speaks of your failures is harsh, mocking, and cruel, you can be certain that voice is not God's. Because the way God came to his failing disciple was gentle, patient, and kind. The real God comes to the failing the way he came to Thomas, close, tender, bearing his own wounds, and saying softly, "Do not be faithless, but believing," and to show you that God still takes those the world would never choose and uses them beyond all expectation. Let me tell you about a man named Dwight Moody. By every worldly standard, he was not a promising candidate for greatness. He was born poor, in a large family, and his father died when Dwight was only a small boy, leaving them in real poverty. He had almost no formal education. He grew up rough and unpolished, and as a young man he worked selling shoes, an ordinary, unremarkable laborer. He was not eloquent. He was not learned. By the standards of the refined and educated religious world of his day, he was a nobody. The kind of man no one would have picked for anything significant, who could barely articulate his own beliefs in the careful language others prized. And yet, God took that uneducated, unpolished shoe salesman and made him one of the greatest evangelists the world has ever known. A man who would preach to enormous crowds across 2 continents and point countless thousands toward God. There is a moment often told from his life when an older preacher remarked to him that the world had yet to see what God could do with and through a man who was fully surrendered to him. Those words gripped Moody's heart. Notice what he concluded from them. He did not conclude that he needed to first become impressive, educated, eloquent, qualified. He concluded simply that he could be available, that he could surrender himself fully to God and let God supply everything he lacked. And that is exactly what God did. The point of his life is not that he was secretly gifted all along. The point is that he was, by the world's measure, not enough. And God used him mightily anyway, because God was never looking for his ability. God was looking for his availability. And the same is true of you. God does not need you to be impressive. He needs you to be available, and he will supply the rest. And think about the ripple of that one available life. Because an uneducated shoe salesman made himself available to God, countless thousands were pointed toward hope. Schools were founded that still teach today. Others were inspired, who in turn touched still others, in a chain of good that has never stopped spreading. None of it happened because the man was qualified. All of it happened because he was willing. You have no idea what God might do through your one small, surrendered, available life. What ripple of good might spread out from your willingness, touching people you will never meet, continuing long after you are gone. You feel like a failure, too small and too flawed to matter much. But the same God who reached the world through a shoe salesman is not limited by your sense of your own smallness. He has always done his largest work through people who felt like the least likely candidates. So do not disqualify yourself from being part of something far bigger than you can see. Offer your small, flawed, available life and let God decide what to do with it. The reach of a surrendered life is never small, because it is not finally measured by the size of the person, but by the size of the God who works through them. And there is freedom in that, a deep relief, if you will let yourself feel it. Because if God required ability, impressiveness, qualification, then your sense of not being enough would be a real disqualification, and your despair would make sense. But he does not require those things. He has, in fact, made a habit throughout history of deliberately passing over the obviously qualified and choosing the obviously unqualified, so that when something good came of it, no one could say it was the person's own greatness that did it. Your lack is not an obstacle to God. It is the very canvas on which he loves to work, so that the glory is plainly his. So you can stop disqualifying yourself. You can stop waiting to become someone more capable before you offer yourself to God. The shoe salesman did not wait until he was eloquent and educated. He offered God what he had, which was not much, and God did the rest. The size of what God can do through you is not limited by the smallness of what you bring. It is limited only by whether you are willing to bring it. Bring your little. Bring your inadequacy. Bring your sense of not being enough. And watch what a great God does with a small, surrendered, available life. So let me tell you what is actually true. The truth all of this has been pointing toward. The verdict you have passed on yourself is not the verdict God has passed on you. You have looked at your failures and concluded, I am a failure. God looks at the very same life and does not reach that conclusion at all, because He measures by an entirely different standard. The Scripture says something striking about how God sees the difference between the righteous and the wicked, and it is not what you would expect. It says, "A just man falleth 7 times and riseth up again." Notice that the righteous person is not the one who never falls. The righteous person is the one who falls 7 times, again and again, and rises up again. Falling is not what separates the failure from the faithful. Rising is. In God's accounting, you are not defined by how many times you have fallen, but by the grace that keeps lifting you back up. And as long as you keep rising, by His help, your falling does not make you a failure. It makes you exactly what the Scripture calls a just man, one who falls and rises and falls and rises again. Sit with how stunning that definition is, because it is the opposite of the verdict you have been believing. You have assumed that righteousness means never falling, that the good people are the ones who get it right, and that your repeated falling proves you are not among them. But the Scripture defines the righteous person precisely as one who falls. The falling is right there in the definition, and what distinguishes them is not a spotless record, but a persistent rising. This means the very thing you took as proof of your failure, that you keep falling, is something the righteous have always done. The saints were not people who never fell. They were people who kept getting up. So the next time you fall and the verdict roars that this proves what you are, you can answer it with Scripture itself. A just man falls and rises again, and I am rising. Therefore, the falling does not disqualify me. It places me among exactly the kind of stumbling, rising, persevering people God has always called His own. And there is a defiant hope God offers to the ones sitting in the rubble of their failures. The prophet, speaking for the fallen, declared, "Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. When I fall, I shall arise. Not if I never fall, but when I fall, even then I shall arise. Because the rising does not depend on my strength, but on the Lord, who is a light to me even in the darkness of my failure." You are allowed to say those words over your own failures tonight. When I fall, I shall arise. Not because you are strong, but because the one who lifts you is faithful, and He will be your light even here, even now, even in the darkness of feeling like a failure. And here is something that should turn your whole sense of inadequacy on its head. God deliberately prefers to work through the weak. The Scripture says that God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. Read that slowly. God chose the weak things on purpose, not because He could not find stronger material, but because He wanted it that way, so that when something good and powerful came out of weak and unlikely people, everyone would know it was God and not the people. Your weakness, your sense of not being enough, your lack of the qualifications the world prizes, is not a problem God has to work around. It is precisely the kind of material He loves to use, the very thing that makes His power unmistakable when He works through you. The world looks at the weak and the failing and passes them over. God looks at them and says, "These are exactly the ones I will use, so that no one can boast except in me." So your feeling of being not enough does not put you at the back of the line for God's purposes. In a strange and beautiful way, It moves you to the front. And here is the deepest truth of all, the one that pulls the whole heavy verdict up by the root. Your standing with God was never based on your performance in the first place. You have been measuring your worth by your successes and failures, as if God grades you the way the world does, as if His acceptance must be earned by getting it right. But the Scripture says, "By grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." Not of works. Your place with God is a gift, not a wage. It was never something you achieved by succeeding, which means it is not something you can lose by failing. You cannot fail your way out of a grace you did not earn your way into. The whole crushing project of trying to be good enough was never the point, because you were never going to be good enough, and you were never asked to be. You were asked to receive a gift. And a gift does not care about your record of failure. It only asks to be received. Let that sink all the way down, because it overturns the entire system you have been living under. You have been operating as though God's love were a wage you must earn by good performance, so that every failure docks your pay, and every success earns a little more favor. And the balance of your worth rises and falls with your record. But grace does not work like a wage. A wage is earned, a gift is given. And the love of God toward you is a gift, freely given, before you did anything to deserve it, and impossible to undo by anything you do to forfeit it. This means your failures, real as they are, do not lower your standing with God, because that standing was never propped up by your successes to begin with. You are loved at your worst exactly as much as at your best, because the love was never a response to your performance. It was a free gift of His heart. You can stop the exhausting work of trying to earn what has already been given. The pressure is off. You were never going to be good enough, and you never needed to be, because someone else was good enough on your behalf, and His love is yours as a gift you cannot fail your way out of. And His mercy does not run out, no matter how many times you return to it. There is a promise that says it is because of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because His compassions fail not. They are new every morning. New every morning. Not rationed, not depleted by how often you have needed them, not running low because you have failed too many times this week. Every single morning, the supply is full again, fresh, undiminished, as if you had never drawn on it before. This is the answer to the despair of repeated failure, the fear that you have used up your chances, that surely God's patience must be wearing thin by now. It is not. His compassions are new this morning, and they will be new again tomorrow, and the morning after that, for as many mornings as you live. You cannot exhaust the mercy of God. You cannot fail so many times that you drain the well. Every morning you wake to a fresh, full supply of compassion, enough for that day's failures and that day's risings. And you may come and draw from it as many times as you need, today and tomorrow, and every day, forever. So let me speak now to the lies that the verdict of failure has been telling you. The first lie is the verdict itself, that you are a failure. But you are not your failures, any more than a child learning to walk is a failure each time they fall. Failing is something you have done. It is not something you are. The most accomplished people who ever lived failed constantly. Failure is simply what it looks like to be a human being attempting things in a hard world. To fail is human and universal and survivable. To be a failure, as a fixed and final identity, is not a truth about you. It is a lie the enemy of your soul loves to whisper. Because as long as you believe you are a failure, you will live like one. You are not a failure. You are a person who has failed, like every person who has ever lived, and who is loved and being lifted by a God who does not define you by your worst moments. Think about how you would never apply this verdict to someone you love. If your closest friend or your own child came to you crushed, saying, "I am a failure," you would not agree with them. You would be heartbroken that they saw themselves that way. You would gently insist on the truth that they are not a failure, that they are a beloved person who is going through a hard time, who has stumbled like everyone stumbles, who is worth so much more than their worst moments. You would refuse to let them believe the lie about themselves. Why, then, do you grant yourself none of the grace you would so freely give them? Why is the verdict you would never pronounce over someone you love the very one you pronounce over yourself, daily, without mercy? Learn to speak to yourself the way you would speak to a beloved friend in the same pain, with the same gentleness, the same refusal to accept the cruel verdict, the same insistence on the truth. You are as worthy of that kindness as anyone you love. Extend to yourself the mercy you would never withhold from them, because it is not indulgence, it is simply the truth. The same truth you can see so clearly for everyone but yourself. The second lie is that you will never change, that the repeated failure proves you are stuck this way forever. But growth is almost always slower than we want, and the absence of instant change is not the absence of all change. God is not finished with you. The same John Mark who quit became profitable. Change in the human heart usually comes not in a single dramatic moment, but in a long, slow, 2 steps forward, 1 step back journey. And the very fact that you are grieved by your failures, that you long to be different, is itself evidence that something in you is alive and growing, not dead and fixed. Do not mistake slow growth for no growth. You are not the same as you were, even if you cannot see it. And the God who began a good work in you has promised to keep at it until it is finished. And notice who finishes the work, because this matters enormously for the lie that you will never change. The promise is not that you will change yourself, will finally muster enough willpower to become who you long to be. The promise is that God, who began the good work in you, will be the one to complete it. The changing is His project, not yours alone, which means its success does not finally rest on your strength, which has failed you so often, but on His faithfulness, which never fails. You are not the contractor responsible for finishing the building. You are the building He is patiently completing, and He does not abandon projects halfway. So when the lie says you will never change, you can answer that your changing was never solely up to you, that the one committed to your transformation is far more faithful and far more patient than you are, and that He has staked His own reputation on finishing what He started in you. You may not see the finished work in this life, but it is being done, slowly, surely, by hands far more capable than your own. And it will be finished, because He promised, and He does not break His promises. The third lie is that God is disappointed in you, that you are failing Him, that He looks at your shortfalls with a frown. But God is not a disappointed taskmaster standing over you with a clipboard, tallying your failures. The Scripture says He is a Father who knows your frame, who remembers that you are dust, who pities his children the way a loving parent pities a struggling child. He is not surprised by your weakness. He knew it before you did, and he loves you in it. Not in spite of fully knowing your failures, but with full knowledge of every one of them. You are not failing a God who expected perfection from you. You are being carried by a Father who never did. Consider how a good parent watches a small child who is genuinely trying. When the child spills the milk while carrying it carefully, or stumbles while running to help, the loving parent does not feel disappointment. They feel tenderness, even a kind of pride at the effort, regardless of the result. The mess is nothing. The trying heart is everything. And if a flawed human parent can look on a struggling child with that much grace, how much more does the perfect Father look on you, who are trying, falling, getting up, trying again? He is not tapping his foot in irritation at your slow progress. He is not comparing you unfavorably to others. He sees the effort behind your failures, the desire underneath your shortfalls, the trying heart you may not even believe you have, and he is moved with tenderness toward it. The disappointment you imagine on God's face is a projection of your own harsh self-judgment, not a true picture of him. His face toward you, even now, even in your failure, is not a frown. It is the warm, patient, delighted face of a father watching a beloved child learn and loving them through every fall. And the fourth lie is that if people knew how much you fail, they would reject you, and so you must hide. But the hiding is its own prison, and the fear is mostly false. Most people, if they knew your struggles, would not recoil but recognize, because they are fighting their own hidden battles with their own sense of failure. And more importantly, the one who already knows every failure you have ever hidden has not rejected you. God sees the worst of you, the parts you would never show anyone, the failures you have buried in shame, and he has not turned away. If the one who knows everything still stays, you do not have to fear that being known will cost you his love. It will not. It never could. And there is a freedom waiting on the other side of that fear, if you will risk it. The freedom of being truly known. The hiding that the fear demands is exhausting, a constant performance, a lifelong effort to keep the failures concealed so that you will not be rejected for them. But that performance is its own kind of loneliness, because a person who is never truly known can never be truly loved. They can only be loved for the mask they show. When you finally let someone safe see the real you, failures and all, and they do not turn away, you discover a love deeper than any you could earn by appearing perfect, the love that knows the worst and stays. God offers you exactly this, and so do the safest of the people he places in your life. You do not have to earn love by hiding your failures. You can be fully known and fully loved at the same time, which is the only love that ever actually satisfies the heart. Risk being known, at least by the one who already knows, and by the few safe souls he gives you. On the other side of the fear of rejection is the deepest belonging you have ever tasted, to be seen completely and kept anyway. So what do you do when you feel like a failure and long to be free of the verdict? A few gentle things. Refuse the global verdict and speak the truer, smaller word. When the accusation comes, "I am a failure," learn to answer it precisely. No, I failed at that thing, and that is human, and it does not define me. Do not let a specific failure expand into a total identity. Catch the slide from "I failed" to "I am a failure," and refuse it every time, replacing the crushing global verdict with the honest, survivable, specific truth. You did not fail at being a person. You fell short at a thing, as everyone does, and you are still loved, still held, still becoming. It can help to actually speak the correction out loud, because the lie has been spoken to you so many times that the truth needs a voice to answer it. When the heavy verdict rises, "I am a failure," say back to it, gently and firmly, the truer words. "I am a beloved child of God who sometimes fails, like every beloved child of God who has ever lived." Name the specific failure honestly if you must. "I fell short here. I wish I had done that differently." But refuse to let it metastasize into a sentence on your whole self. The difference between "I failed" and "I am a failure" is the difference between a passing weather and the climate, between a single wave and the whole ocean. A failure is something that happened. It is not the sea you swim in, not the air you breathe, not the truth of who you are. So, catch the lie in the act of expanding and shrink it back down to its true size. A thing that happened, survivable, forgivable, already covered by grace, and powerless to define the beloved person it happened to. Measure yourself by your rising, not by your falling. Since God Himself defines the righteous not as those who never fall, but as those who rise again, take that as your own standard and let it free you. Stop counting your falls. Start counting your risings. Every time you get back up, every time you try again after failing, every time you refuse to let a fall be the end, you are doing the very thing that, in God's eyes, marks a faithful life. The goal was never to never fall. The goal is to keep rising, with His help. And you can do that today, no matter how many times you have fallen, simply by getting up one more time. And let this redefine what a good day even looks like. You have probably been measuring your days by whether you avoided failure, counting a day good only if you did not stumble, and counting every day with a fall as a defeat. But by God's measure, a day in which you fell and then got back up is not a defeat. It is a victory. Because the rising is the thing. The person who falls 7 times and rises 7 times has not failed 7 times. They have triumphed 7 times. Because each rising is an act of faith, a refusal to let the fall be final, a small, defiant trust that God's mercy is new again. So stop scoring your life by your falls and start honoring your risings. Did you get up again this morning after yesterday's failure and try once more? Then yesterday was not wasted, and today is not a failure. You are doing the very thing the faithful have always done, the thing God Himself calls righteousness: falling and rising, and falling and rising, and never, by His grace, staying down. The getting up is the win, and you can win every single time, simply by rising once more. Bring the repeated failure into the light, instead of hiding it in shame. The failures we hide in shame keep their power. The failures we bring honestly to God begin to lose it. So take the thing you keep failing at, the pattern you cannot break, the shame you have buried, and bring it into the open before God. Not with self-hatred, but with honesty, the way a child shows a parent the thing they broke. He already knows. He is not waiting to condemn you. He is waiting to help you. And the grace that meets you when you stop hiding is often the very thing that begins, slowly, to change what willpower never could. This is one of the great secrets of real change, and it runs exactly opposite to how we instinctively operate. We think we must clean ourselves up before we come to God, must conquer the failure first and then present the victory. But it works the other way around. You bring the unconquered failure, the still active struggle, the thing you have not beaten, into the light of God's presence and grace. And it is the grace itself, the experience of being loved in the middle of the failure, rather than after it, that begins to loosen the failure's grip. Shame keeps a sin alive by driving it into the dark, where it festers in secrecy, and shame loops back into more failure. Grace kills it slowly by dragging it into the light, where it is met not with the condemnation that would only deepen the cycle, but with a love that gradually makes the sin less appealing than the one who loves you. So do not wait until you have stopped failing to draw near to God. Draw near in the middle of the failing, again and again, and let His grace do the slow, deep work of transformation that your willpower, hammering away in the dark, was never able to accomplish. And offer Him your availability, not your ability. Stop waiting until you are good enough, impressive enough, successful enough to be useful to God, because that day will never come, and it was never required. Offer Him, instead, exactly what you have, yourself, as you are, failures and all, available, willing, surrendered. That is what He has always wanted. He took an uneducated shoe salesman and changed the world through him, not because the man was capable, but because he was available. God is not asking you to be enough. He is asking you to be His, and to let Him supply everything you lack. And if the verdict of failure has grown so heavy that you cannot lift it alone, do not be too ashamed to reach for help. Sometimes the sense of being a failure is tangled up with wounds that go back years, with voices from the past that told you that you were not enough, with depression or anxiety that colors everything dark. And these are not things you can simply think your way out of by yourself. There is no shame and much wisdom in letting a trusted friend, a pastor, or a counselor help you untangle the lie from the truth, help you see yourself more clearly than the verdict allows. God often lifts these heavy burdens through the hands and words of other people, through being honestly known and still accepted, through someone sitting with you long enough to help you believe what is true. You were not meant to carry the verdict alone, and you were not meant to dismantle it alone either. Let someone help you. Reaching for help is not one more failure to add to the tally. It is one of the bravest and wisest risings of all. And finally, be patient with yourself, with the slowness of your own becoming. We are far harder on ourselves than God ever is, demanding instant transformation, treating every slow patch as proof of failure, refusing ourselves the gentleness we would extend to anyone else who is genuinely trying. But growth in the human soul is more like the growth of a tree than the flipping of a switch. Slow, seasonal, often invisible from day to day, with long stretches where nothing seems to be happening above the ground while roots are deepening below. God is endlessly patient with that slow growth. He is not anxious about your pace, not frustrated by how long it is taking, not threatening to give up if you do not hurry. He has all the time in the world for you, and He is committed to finishing what He started, no matter how long the becoming takes. So give yourself the patience He gives you. Stop demanding of yourself a speed God Himself does not demand. Let your growth be slow. Let your becoming take the time it takes, and trust the patient gardener who is tending your soul with a gentleness you have not yet learned to show yourself. You do not have to arrive tomorrow. You only have to keep growing, slowly, in the hands of the one who is in no hurry and will not give up. Let me leave you with this, and then I will let you go gently. Picture a small child learning to walk. They pull themselves up, they take a wobbling step, and they fall. They pull up again, they step, they fall again, over and over, all day long, falling and falling and falling. And not once does anyone watching that child think, "What a failure." No one tallies the falls. No one shakes their head in disappointment. Everyone watching sees the same beautiful thing: a child learning to walk. And the falling is not the opposite of the walking. The falling is how the walking is learned. Every tumble is part of it, necessary, expected, no cause for shame at all. And no child ever learned to walk by refusing to fall, by waiting until they could do it perfectly before they tried. They learned by falling, and rising, and trying again, 100 times a day, until one day the falling gave way to walking, not because the falls had stopped mattering, but because the falls had been, all along, the very way the walking came. Your failures, brought to God, are not the proof that you will never get there. They are part of how you are getting there. And the parent is not standing back keeping a record of the falls. The parent is crouched down a few steps away, hands open, face full of delight, ready to catch, ready to steady, ready to set the child on their feet again, cheering not for a flawless performance, but for every single rise. That is how God your Father watches you. He is not tallying your failures. He is counting your risings, delighting in each one. His hands always open, always reaching, always ready to lift you up and set you back on your feet. You are not a failure, dear one. You are a child learning to walk, held by a Father who has never once stopped reaching out His hands to you, who does not measure you by how many times you have fallen, but loves you through every fall and lifts you up again and again, as many times as it takes. So rise once more tonight, not by your strength, but by His. The falling was never the end of the story. The rising is. And the Father who loves you is reaching out His hands to lift you even now. And when you wake tomorrow, and the old verdict tries to settle over you again before your feet even touch the floor, take this with you and say it against the lie. I am not a failure. I am a child learning to walk, loved through every fall. Say it when you stumble into the same old failure once more. Say it when the midnight tally begins its rigged accounting. Say it when you compare yourself to others and come up short, when the gap between who you are and who you meant to be aches, when you're tired and tempted to stop trying. You are not a failure. You are a beloved child of a patient Father, falling and rising on the long road of learning to walk, covered by a grace you cannot exhaust, held by hands that have never once stopped reaching for you. The verdict you have carried for so long was never true, and it was never God's. And you do not have to carry it one more night. Lay it down. Let yourself be lifted. and rise, dear one. Not because you have finally become strong enough, but because the God who loves you is reaching down, as he always has, to set you gently back on your feet and to walk you home, one rising at a time.